Hey, it's me, Rob Ryan. I am back with another brand new episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. You know, sometimes you have a conversation with someone that you have not yet met in person, that you've known digitally for a handful of years, and you have a ton of respect for, and it immediately clicks. And you think to yourself, wow, this is like a deeply personal, immersive, fulsome kind of conversation you would have with someone you would have known for years. And that is the conversation I got to have today with Marisa Estrada, aka Ritzy P, my friend from here in Southern California, a maven of the podcasting industry, long experienced player in the world of media, where kind of media meets art, meets business, meets technology, meets community and activism. And we talked about it all. We talked about just kind of how we can be better entrepreneurial thinkers in how we tell the stories from more diverse points of view, how we represent and see more diverse groups of people, how we can build products for and by people that are not just people that look and or sound like Rob Ryan does as a middle-aged white guy. And we dive into all of that together. We talk about how her life experience has shaped her view on technology and in media, how she is the storyteller that she is, and why she got into podcasting at such an early era stage in podcasting, probably almost 10, 15 years ago, which is like early days for podcasts. So if you're curious about like how to become a more empowered storyteller as a young Latina or as a brown-skinned person or someone coming from just a marginalized community, you just want to better understand how we can think about more inclusive spaces in tech as well as in our media storytelling, this is a conversation that I hope you will enjoy as much as she and I did making it for you.
We are so grateful to be supported by these community champions: Sales MD, Team Friday, Realist Lab, Kiana Patterson, Diego Chavez, Jer Boucher, Heather Ryder, Janine Sua, Lily Roca, and Steve Kernan.
Hola, hello, hi, bienvenido, and welcome back, or welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers. As you may or may not know, this is the show where I get the privilege to have weekly conversations with people who I think are some of the best and brightest entrepreneurial thinkers across all sectors and segments of society and industry, as we come together to serve the noble cause that my mom always tried to implore me to do as a young man, which is that we try to use our conversations to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. And Lord knows there's enough going on in the world today that we could definitely try and have Ritzy and I leave it a little bit better than we found it this morning when we woke up. So let me tell you about our guest before we get to meet her. We are super excited. Grateful, honestly, to have Ritzy P, the talented host of the Word to Your Mama podcast and founder of Ritzy Periwinkle Consulting Agency. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her because her background and her story is incredible. She's, in my humble opinion, a force of nature across culture, tech, and advocacy. Marisa Estrada Rivera, aka Ritzy P, is a first-gen Mexican-American creative, paid speaker, consultant, and relationship builder who has spent over 20 years blending art, music, and emerging tech into platforms for real change here in Southern California and across the world, frankly. She's spoken at, this is just insane to say out loud, she's spoken at the United Nations and at VCon. She's a board member of Women of Web3, an organization she's going to tell us more about later. She's worked in artist relations and festival management at global events powerhouse AEG. She co-hosts the Get Down podcast through Butterscotch Media and is a partner in Ola Metaverso and her own consultancy, which we already referred to, where she has had the opportunity over the course of her career to work with big brands like Coinbase, Golden Voice, and even the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, where she teaches these organizations how to move with intention inside their communities. She's deeply passionate about representation of the unheard, marginalized communities that exist in our world, and she uses her social media platforms as well as her podcast and her own lived experiences to tell the stories of people whose stories, frankly, need to be told. And that's a lot of why I've invited her on here today, because I want us to really talk about that. Whether she's speaking on global stages or she's designing immersive experiences, Ritzy is a powerhouse mom, a friend, a tia, a collaborator, and she's just I like to think from afar, a pragmatic optimist who's full of love and gratitude, even on the hardest days. I'm so grateful to have her here today. I think the world needs about 1 million more of her. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Thinkers, Ritz. It's great to share this conversation.
Rob, that was lovely. Thank you so much for that intro. I'm almost in tears because of the love that you've given, my intro. Usually people just do a little bit of the businessy stuff, but you've added extras that, thank you for seeing me. And I really appreciate that intro.
My pleasure. It is a pleasure to deliver it. I selfishly might say that I have taken a liking to crafting unique intros for everybody that I get the chance to talk to, because as we are about to find out in this conversation, like, your lived experience, your life story covers so much ground that it deserves an intro like that, in my humble opinion. So you're welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic to hear all of that. I'm exhausted just thinking of all of the lives. And you forget, I think you forget. And I think previous guests have said similar things when you've read their intro. You're just like, whoa, I did all that?
Yep. No, and it is I would be excited to be on a show someday if somebody read something like that about me, mostly because of what you just said. Like, not just it's a little ego stroke. That's always fun, right? But just that whole, like,
Always.
ability to sit back and reflect and go, holy crap, like, I did that, or I've do that, or I've done that.
Right.
Right. We forget too much. We forget too often how, especially when you're a hardworking mom, like, there's a million things to keep you busy on a daily basis. And you think that's all you do. The truth is, you've done and you are doing all of this. And that's also, honestly, to go back to my comment a couple of minutes ago, like, that's really, I could talk to you about a million things, but my impetus, the trigger that said, I really want to have a conversation with her, was that you have this very powerful, very defined belief around the fact that we all need to see each other better. We all need to hear each other's stories differently and more open-mindedly. And then we're going to talk media, we're going to talk tech and all that stuff, the intersection that you live in. But that's really what I wanted to have us have a conversation with. Fundamentally, you've heard me say that maybe before on the show, I did tease it in the intro, right? Like, I do the show just to kind of almost satiate my own curiosity. Right. About both the biggest problems and the biggest opportunities that I think we face in our society. And I'm really just like, hey, I want to talk to someone who thinks about this part of our society 1,000 times more than I do every day, and see what they can instruct us on how we can do this better. And so that's why you're here. And so I'm going to give you the first question, and then we can run with this conversation in every direction we like. The first thing I really would love to know is, how can we think, or how should we think more entrepreneurially, or differently, if you want to use that word, about the stories that we tell in our cultural and business media? How can we do this better? How can we think more entrepreneurially about the way we tell our stories in our media?
I think there's a few ways to think about it. I have also seen a shift of how companies are using social media, right? It's a lot of, if you across the board is like, how do you show up? It's like storytelling. It's like telling your story. And one of the reasons why I got into podcasting in the first place was a good friend of mine told me, she's like, your story is so unique. There's a universal and the specific, right? Like, being so specific in your story that it seems counterintuitive, but people can latch on and relate and see themselves in it, right? And so, entrepreneurial thinking wise, a lot of us have podcasts because it feeds into whatever we're doing on a bigger scale. But I think bigger than that is hearing these diverse stories and seeing ourselves in that. I think you can really connect with folks in a different way that maybe you don't have access to. And that it's that thought of, I'm going to just tell my story. I'm unique. There's no one like me. People are going to connect with you. They're going to follow you. They're going to look up to you. They're going to really take what you say to heart. And then they're going to follow you into whatever you do. So I could be just telling my crazy stories. People connect to that. And then eventually it comes out that I do such and such. And it's an offer. And they're just like, I don't know what this is, if I even need it, but I'm going to roll with you because I connect with you so much. And I think a lot of us in the world, and you mentioned it earlier in the intro, a lot of uncertainties and craziness in the world, especially today where we're at. And people are just trying to connect.
Yeah.
And if they connect with you, then you're building not a customer, you're not building a fan, you're building community. And I think that's where we really need to think about it. Entrepreneur, who's going to roll with you in your company, in the journey of your company for the long run and the long term. And that's connecting with them on a different level beyond your product, your service, whatever it is.
No.
B2B, B2C. I think that there's a loyalty and an alliance that is maybe a stronger foundation when you have storytelling as part of that. And if you're representing a underrepresented community, even more so.
Yeah, man, it's so true, right? I mean, to me, the one of the differences of the many, right, is that, and I now hear people like us referred to as like independent media, right, as opposed to the mainstream, the bigger corporates or whatever. And I think for so long as like on the bigger corporate side, you tell me what your opinions are, your perspective. It's always just a bit like audience accumulation, right? Like they don't really care who the person is as long as the person fits like a certain demographic of listener or viewer, and they're pushing the stories out there. Whereas, as you say, it feels more, what's the word I'm looking for? It feels more personal,
Yes.
right? Like this feels more, even though the numbers of people in your audience, your listeners, your viewers could be huge numbers, right? Could be millions, could be hundreds of thousands, but it still feels more personal to
Right.
me.
And going back to that, there's a lot of podcasts, a lot of creators, whether it's a podcast or it's, your social media. You could have 10 million followers, but what is the ROI on that? Are they just there to be looky-loos, or are they really invested in you? And I feel like those numbers are really important. Like, and I think it goes back to you're building community. You're building a community that will roll with you with whatever. And then that ROI number is bigger and I always hate, I'm in so many different industries, and I have conversations daily with friends that I've become really close with in these industries. And it's kind of sad to see, say, muralists. I have friends that, I come from the art world, so I have like world famous muralists. And one of the first questions to get a wall or be in a mural festival, a huge, global mural festival, is like, what is your IG account, like numbers, like what is your following? And
Right,
it's
yeah.
just like, that doesn't always translate, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
I really feel that the storytelling and, like you said, the connecting, the connection and being personal, I think that goes a long way.
Yeah, no, 100%. Why do you think, I mean, you're a walking embodiment of what I'm about to ask, but why do you think it's so important for us in the world today to hear from more diverse voices, right, in our
Right.
media and business? Like, but again, media can be cultural media or it can be like businessy media, because you and I straddle both sides. But
Right.
so why is it so important that it isn't just all people who look like me?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I got into podcasting a long, long time ago in 2011 is because I loved podcasting. I love learning from stories of people, whether it's directors. Like, I just want to know. I love to collect data, right? And what was out there? It was people that didn't look like me, but I still related and I still listened. I was super loyal because I was just like, well, I don't have access to this BTS of like why this director did what they did, or why this actor, like, oh, actors, they make a lot of money, but they still have that problem of not wanting to spend it because they don't feel, like that type of stuff is fascinating to me. But then you go into representation and why representation matters. If you think of mass media and you think the history, why aren't we represented more? Today is a different day, but I'm talking about 5, 10, 15 years ago. You go to the execs on the business side and they're like, oh, that's not going to do well. That's not going to do well. And then something happens, say, for example, Black Panther.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, we need this. We want this. We will show up. And when you're talking about entrepreneurial thinking, they want to see how it impacts their numbers, their bottom line, right? So if you think of that on the entrepreneurial side, it makes sense in the numbers. We're starving for this. We need this.
Yeah.
When you're talking about independent media and just also just social media, I feel like it's super important to have these diverse voices because there's lack of it, but also there's innovation to get different perspectives from people that maybe don't think like you because one, usually there's no access and limited education, but there's brilliant minds and people with high IQs in every corner of the world that maybe don't even have internet access. Do you know what I mean? So representation is super important because if you see someone that looks like you or even might not exactly look like you, but it looked like someone in your community, then you're like, oh, I can do that. I can achieve that. Right. Yeah. And representation is also about what is happening to our community, giving more access and just more education to, people that look like us. And you see it via the bottom line numbers, but then you also see it as far as, I think ACAST Research did a study last year, saying that 62% of host-read sponsorships, they have ROI because they really trust the host, right?
Okay. And
then you see someone that maybe, has a podcast that they're a representation to a community that doesn't really see themselves hardly. The download numbers might not be in the millions, but the ROI is higher because, they see themselves in this person. They built a community. That person is not only talking about whatever they're talking about, but they're also somehow giving back to the community and providing information. Yeah. So that ROI is usually by the numbers higher than someone that maybe has like 1 million downloads because you want to support someone that looks like you. You want to support someone that, sounds like you and is talking about specific problems that you might have. And I think that's why, that's one of the many reasons that representation is super important and having these diverse voices in mass media and in independent media.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Haney and Company. We all know that in today's complex financial landscape, having a trusted advisor can make all the difference. Since 1960, Haney and Company has been providing comprehensive accounting services to a diverse range of clients, from small businesses to large corporations. With nearly 400 professionals across 13 locations, they offer services in tax, audit, business consulting, and client advisory. In fact, their commitment to excellence has earned them recognition from Accounting Today and Forbes magazines. At Haney and Company, though, it's not just about balancing books. It's about building lasting relationships based on trust and mutual growth. So visit HaneyCPAs.com. That's HaneyCPAs.com to learn how they can support your business's financial journey.
You'll laugh at this one. My show producer, Deanna Burnell, was teasing me the other day. So you were part of this. I went through kind of a little bit of a booking exercise lately. Like, okay, we had kind of run down our show schedule through the end of the summer, and we were getting ready to okay, let's make another push here. And she looked up and she was like, boss, have you looked at the inside of Notion where she keeps all this magical stuff, right? She's like, have you looked at the roster of upcoming shows? I'm like, yeah, no, I'm super stoked. We got 9 or 10 people at booked. She's like, yeah, are you going to book men anymore or no? You're only she's like, are you only going to book diverse women of color? She's like, I'm down for it. Proud Mexicana that she is, but she's like, what's going on here? I was like, right? I was like, honestly, I have extended the olive branch. I've invited as many men as I did women in this past little push of mine. I'm like, for whatever reason, the women say, yeah, this is awesome, I will schedule myself. Right. The men say, yeah, this is awesome, I will schedule myself. The women actually schedule themselves. Right? I was like, so there we go. So no, I hear you. I have to go back one section here just quickly because this is just a personal question. Yes. Because my daughter and I get into this argument all the time, and she thinks I'm a nerd for this. So context, I'm a huge television consumer. I love good television. I love old television. I love new stuff. I love television. television. I love television more than movies. I love movies, but I love television more. So my daughter is now a television writer. So it like
awesome.
gives us even something more to talk about, right? I'm curious because you said you kind of got into podcasts like way back when as a listener, as a consumer, because you love kind of the behind the scenes parts of things and the backstory. Okay, so now every great TV show that comes out has its companion podcast. Do you listen to those?
If I love the show, such as The Gilded Age, please believe it, Rob.
Awesome.
Please believe it.
Okay.
I'll watch it on Sunday because I love it so much as soon as it comes out that night. And then Monday, while I'm doing dishes, while I'm cooking, while I'm cleaning, the official, Gilded Age podcast. Please believe it. I have not wavered, even being part of this industry, have not wavered from listening to podcasts. I also, I'm part of the Podcast Academy. I'm also a blue ribbon judge for the Ambies, which are one of the biggest podcast awards. I love it. I was like, yeah, what, category can I listen to and judge? Love it.
That's
like
amazing.
I consume so much.
So my daughter doesn't like them. Not like she doesn't like not like them. She's not like against them. She just doesn't consume them. And I'm like, you're literally a writer. Like these people are like giving you the back. Like this is why we wrote the plot line the way we did on this episode. I was like, how could that not fascinate you? She's like, I don't know. I just haven't gotten into it. She's like, I love the shows. But she's like, there's a part of me that I just kind of like to think through how it worked out in my own brain. I was like, okay, that's crazy. I was like, it's like an extra tool, right?
No, but I think it makes sense. I mean, she's in the biz, right? She's in the biz. And, you kind of want to give yourself a break, and probably watching another show that she's not writing on is probably enough. And, going into a podcast is maybe too next level, but I get it. But I nerd out, Rob, of anything. If there's something like science, whatever, I nerd out. And if there's a podcast about it with academics or people that are in that industry, please believe it. I'm all about it.
I love it. All right. So let's go further back in your career. We talked about it earlier. You worked at AEG. I mean, you worked at essentially kind of the intersection of people, experiences, music. And this is, again, just a pure personal curiosity because you're in the media world now, as deeply as you are, as you just described, and you were in it before, like way before you probably thought you'd be in it the way you are now. Like, how has it changed? Like, what do our music festivals and the people who consume them and how we produce them, and like, what is different or maybe not different about what it's like today in 2025 than what it was like in 2005?
So I had the unique privilege of working artist relations for Coachella, Stagecoach, all the festivals for over 7 years before I became a mom. They wanted people that knew the players in the industry, that weren't going to freak out when you're driving one of the, main artists or stuff like that. And so I've seen a lot being in the music industry, attending the festival as an attendee, but also working the festival in that capacity. I've seen so much change. I started working with Coachella was still one day, one weekend. Do you know what I mean?
And when it was like cool for the people who went to it, but the rest of the world didn't know about it. It wasn't cool yet.
Yeah. Like it was super cool. And I mean, the stories for days that we won't get into now, but the stories for days of the interactions I had with artists. But I've seen it. I didn't go this year. I went last year as a guest, but as a guest with, the best wristband ever, and I took my niece and they were like, this is your first time and this is the access you get. And I was like, yeah, don't get used to it. But it's changed so much. It's big business.
Big business, right? It feels like
huge business. Like it wasn't back in the days. To go back in the days is the artist compound was different. It was really exclusive. Now you can kind of pay to be back there. There's all these activations, and I get it, right? It's big business. You have to figure out how to make that money. And seeing that kind of takes things away. But what I've also seen is people have seen how lucrative festivals can be. The big players, the big two, the big three, see how lucrative that could be. So they're like, oh, this audience is now older. So why don't we do this subgenre festival that we could do every year, change the lineup, something like Cruel World, right? It's like for the Gen Xers and all of us that love like The Cure and Interpol and stuff like that. Like there's that. And then there's also other ones that are like the Besame Mucho, where it's like Spanish language, but across different genres. So it's like a Coachella, but with Spanish. And you're just like, oh. And then what I also love to see is artists that are curating their own festivals and in collaborating with Live Nation, such as Tyler, the Creator. And he has Camp Flognog that's coming up in November at the Dodger Stadium, right? And then you see smaller things. And I've been wanting to attend because I have family that live close to Napa Valley. You have Blue Note Jazz. And I don't know if you know, they have the Blue Note Jazz Fest at Napa, but it's like hip hop, R&B. And just last month, they had a new thing called the Black Radio Experience up in Napa.
Oh, wow. Now, is this the same Blue Note people that own the clubs? Which
yes.
They just opened up a Hollywood location that I just walked past the other night on my walk.
Right. It's the same people. It's the same people. So they're like, oh, let me take this, because they have the Essen Fest and they have like, the New Orleans Jazz Fest. But it's just like, oh, let's evolve as our audiences have evolved. Like, let's do what they need for this younger audience, right? But also, we still have this audience that's growing. And then I saw recently, and I was super intrigued. I was like, let me go down this rabbit hole. There's this one by Complex Media, and it's called, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. It's called the Complex Family Style Food Fest.
Okay.
And it's specifically streetwear meets culinary experiences, but it's all ages. Because I was like, oh yeah, of course. Those of us that love streetwear, that were into like hype gear and all that stuff and waiting in lines, we've grown up. We have kids, we have families. We're still into the streetwear, but now we want, experiences that we could take the whole family to that still has like that cool factor.
Wow.
And so I've seen so many different changes, some for the best and just some for just to evolve for the times. I mean, I think we could all say so many industries and so many lives have been impacted by the pandemic, right? And it's just like, oh, let's pivot, let's shift, like let's evolve, let's try new things. And I really like what's happening. And as far as what I see happening in the future, I've already attended raves and some of my friends' global DJ sets in the metaverse. I've already been in those, and those have been fun. But I think even as we're becoming more tech-centric, I think IRL, in real life events, is always going to be a thing. Like maybe it will be like everything we do is like, we're like this and we're doing this, with the Oculus type thing. Maybe that's our daily life. But then in real life situation, festival is going to be like, oh my God, we need it because I don't know about you. I love music. I love the arts. I love film. There's something you can be, I'm sure, who's to say in 5-10 years, they're going to, I know Meta has been working on, they have the haptics for being with the Oculus, but they're trying to do like smells and motions and so to try to recreate. But I don't know. There's a vibe and a frequency that happens of a vibration frequency exchange when you're live at a music event, or when you're live at a movie event,
or just live together and having a podcast conversation in front of 100 people, right?
Totally, it changes everything.
Yeah,
totally.
I don't think my humble opinion, right? I don't think we'll digitize out the humanity of out of humankind. I think what we'll do is we'll probably, as you've already alluded to in your other examples, we'll probably just kind of make them more premium experiences, right? Like we'll make the in-person experience, the real life thing, we'll make that more of kind of the premium thing that people go to for those reasons, right?
It'll be like nostalgic, like, oh, let's go in person.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because to us, it would be natural. I'm older than you are, but like to us, it would be more natural.
Are you, Rob? I think we might be the same age. but by the way, I would always say I'm older than you anyways, even if right? That was just a polite thing to do. Smart man.
Right, exactly. Right. But like to the kids that grow up on Roblox or whatever, right? Like that may be their choice. Like this is like, okay, I'm going to go do this premium thing, right? Because it's unique to them because it won't be digital. And in that sense, maybe healthier. So I was going to ask you a question, but we've already kind of talked about like why you got into it and why you got into podcasting the way you did. So I'm going to throw something in here that wasn't in my script at all. But I also realized I wasn't really giving you a chance to talk about it. Now I really just want to know why. We know why you got into podcasting. why did you start, and what is it that you love about your podcast that you have? Like, I know you host a couple different podcasts, and as you alluded to before we went on air, like you host one as a professional host for a production company that isn't, but you have your podcast that I referenced in your intro. Like, why your podcast, and what is it that you love about gathering together with those people that you get on your show to just chop it up about the stuff that you guys talk about?
So I started podcasting way back in the days when I had to do a WordPress site. We didn't have all the gadgets and the gadgets that we have now. And it's, literally a couple of buttons, record, edit. AI can edit a bunch of stuff, and then boom, post it and it gets distributed. That wasn't the case in 2010, 2011. And it was just kind of like a hobby situation. I did one, it was for art. From the street up. I did another one, was the nerd out, because even if you don't consider yourself a nerd, everyone nerds out about whatever that they love. But in 2020, it was August, and I was like, what am I going to do while we're in lockdown? I want to do something with my son, who at the time was 8. And I was like, let's do a podcast. And a friend pointed out, a couple of friends were like, your tribe, your network of people is crazy. You have access to these amazing people, but as friends, like not even just colleagues. And so there you should definitely do something. And it's called Word to Your Mom because I'm a homeschooling mom. And initially I was going to do a blog about homeschooling. And so I already had the name, bought the name. And so we just started doing it. My son, we call him the Supernatural Bear. He had a segment at the time. He's retired. He's no longer part of the podcast. But during that, it was great. We recorded the intro, and, he would talk about whoever was the guest. And that was the beginning of that. So for whatever that was, it was a time. I have that documented. It's fantastic. It was weird because it was me solo and I didn't have a bunch of co-hosts. But I was just like, oh, having these conversations is super important. And one of the things that I've noticed, like we're about to release the 200th episode, is that looking back, it would be someone like from Academy Award winners to, global artists to activists. But say they're doing a press junket for whatever they're promoting. I happen to ask them around the same time. They'll do the same kind of, answers to the questions. But with me, we go way back.
Right.
It's another conversation. So you can have someone that, is doing the kind of not generic, but, the kind of like the status quo answers, and they're being asked kind of the basic questions regarding that project. But for us, we'll be like, well, what was the motivation? Do you remember when we did this? And remember, like, how did you evolve? And it's usually, for the most part, it's folks of color, right? It's not always, but 95%, it's folks of color from all these different industries and all these different lives that I've lived. And what I love is the feedback that I get from people. They're like, oh my God, that was so inspiring. I always want to not just have a convo, but always like, what can people take away from this and what can people learn? Just like you, I feel like you're always providing some type of value. And for me, it was very, very important to have majority women. I have men on there as well, but just people with different perspectives, and that people could see themselves. And if there's someone that's like, oh, how am I ever going to, I'm never going to dream of becoming an Academy Award winner. Well, I have a brown person, a brown man, Joseph Patel on here to talk about how he went from the music industry, where I met him, to winning an Academy Award for a documentary about music. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, you didn't know that he came from another industry. A creative is a creative, and I think another important thing that I love doing on our podcast, and we always bring up, is the nonlinear career path. I know you always think growing up, especially our generation, is like, you graduate high school, you go to college, you pick that one profession, you're in there, you retire, that's it.
Yep.
And that's not the case. It wasn't the case for me. And it's has yet to be the case for anyone I've ever had on the podcast. And I'm sure for you, it's similar.
Yeah.
I'm sure you found the same thing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, 100% true in my life. Like, that is 100% true. No, I think the first major disappointments I let down my dad was when I decided to not work with him anymore and went in a completely different career direction. And then when I got divorced from my first wife, the mother of my beautiful daughter, he was like, "That's it. You're a failure." I was like, "Well, like you thought I was going to do those two things forever." Like, no, come on, man. Like, I'm just not wired innocent that way. I'm your son, but apparently I have my mom's DNA in me too, right? So yeah, no, totally appreciate that. I love that. I think so many of us, like ours was a pandemic story. Like, so this podcast had a different name, a different branding back beyond a couple of years ago when I shifted things to widen it out a bit. And it served kind of the purposes of a consulting business we were running at the time. But it was initially literally like almost a joke, a gag between myself and a mentee, this amazing woman who has become like an extra daughter for me, Ileana Felix, down in Guadalajara, originally from La Paz in Baja Sur. And Ile and I were joking like March or April of the pandemic, like early months, early days even, right? And she was like, come on, could you imagine if we ever published our WhatsApp conversations that we have? Just our WhatsApp voice notes back and forth. Because by that point, I had lived and worked in Latin America. So obviously I was like a devotee of WhatsApp, right? And I was like, yeah, you would never allow us to publish that. I was like, because you're like a Mexicana. Like, you are so afraid of confrontation and that somebody might perceive something that you said wrong. Like, you think it's funny when you say it to me. But if I ever said, let's publish that from last week, you would kill me. Right? She was like, oh my God, you're right. No, we can't do that. Right. But and I was like, what if we did a podcast? Right. And such was born the experience. Very, like you, very personal, very rooted in like, what are we going to do now that we have to figure out what we're going to do? But how can we also stay connected and build community, or stay connected to the people that we now can't go have coffee with because we're not supposed to get within 6 feet of them? And that's an incredible story. I love that. And 200 episodes. Shout out to you. I'm chasing you from right behind you. 100, you're going to be like 179. So we're right behind you, right? But 200, I'm never going to catch you because you're never going to stop. So we're going to do this till we die.
I might stop, Rob. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, if you do, I'm going to pass you then someday. No, I love it. I was doing some research in preparation for this conversation, and I was shocked to find, you probably know some of these statistics kind of off the top of your head, but I was fascinated to find, I should say, like 25% of active podcasters are Latinos or Latinas. Unfortunately, I tried to find out, dive deeper and say like, okay, what percentage is Latinas? And they were like, sorry, we don't have that information. I was like, all right, we got to go generically with Latinos, right? But then what was more interesting to me was that there's been like a 72% growth in Latino listeners to podcasts in the last 5 years. And for the first time in the history of podcasting now, audiences are essentially 50-50. Like that's like, so to me, talk to me a little bit, not just about your own experience with your own show, but maybe this is even indicative of like the work you do with Butterscotch Media or beyond, right? Or what you see in your friends and what they're creating. Like, talk about this landscape of podcasting, which you love way longer than me, by the way. I think I listened to my first podcast in like 2014. When a friend was like, I know you walk a lot, like, here, why don't you listen to this thing? It's called a podcast. I was like, what is that? I was like, and I was literally, he was like, it's like from your iPad, but it's like a radio broadcast. So podcast. I was like, okay, it sounds, and I got hooked, and it was a startup one that he sent me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm hooked. This is the greatest medium ever. I could just walk around with this in my ears. But talk to me today, looking forward, right? As a Latina in this space, what do you think about the landscape of podcasting, this growing Latino participation, both from a producer, podcaster standpoint, but as well as a consumer standpoint? And then what can we continually do other than just continue to have people like you be highlighted and amplified? Like, what can we continue to do to create more opportunities to feed that growth?
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Chisos Capital. Everyone knows that raising capital is hard. And frankly, finding the next pool of entrepreneurs to get access to as limited investors is sometimes impossible too. Do you have a big idea, a dream you're building, but you're struggling to find early funding? Well, Chisos is changing the game for founders, creators, athletes, and investors. Whether you're launching a startup, growing your creative brand, or training for the big leagues, Chisos backs you. Chisos uniquely invests up to $100,000 in people, not just products, whether they be entrepreneurs, creators, or even athletes. With their unique CISA model, convertible income share agreements, founders get flexible funding without giving up equity or ownership, and investors get attractive returns and great upside with less risk. Chisos works for both investors and the people bringing our world to life. If you're seeking access to a truly diverse pool of deals, or you're someone who feels overlooked by the VC game, Chisos is ready to back you. So apply now at chisos.io.
Right. Yeah, the numbers have been great, in the past years, because I think it's a younger demographic, but also when I was doing research, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe a year ago, there's still people that are finding podcasts via YouTube and not necessarily a video podcast. Like when I first initially, maybe it's been a year, not even, that I'm have video on YouTube. It was all audio. And you can put your RSS feed and it automatically uploads audio with just a photo. And when I saw that statistic, that's why I did it. I was like, oh, people are still, they don't know how to navigate some of these apps, right? They don't know that they have access, that it's free or, semi-free, and they have access to these, to podcasts. And then I think there's a younger demographic, and I think that has helped. I think with growing of social media, especially TikTok, people are putting their snippets and you're just like, oh, you're just getting this soundbite. Like, oh, I want to know more and there's more folks of color that have entered the space, and they're utilizing social media in a different way that people are like, oh, this is easy. This is an easy lift. I can go here. Now with video, everyone and their mother has to do video. Even Spotify, you can upload your video that gives you that extra, because our attention spans are
Right.
so,
Yeah.
so little, so minimal. And so I feel like that's why we're big in population, but now we have the access and we know how to get on there. But also there's more and more podcasts of people that look like us and sound like us. Like there's podcasts that I would have loved when I was in high school and college, to have people that sound like my primos that are just shooting, the ish
Right.
online. Like that's a win. And I would definitely lock in and be a loyal listener to that. But I think a way to support is going back to, if you're a business and you want to reach that demographic, right? Whether it's Latinos that are, age 20 to 35, or something like mine. My demo skews a little bit older, from like 25 to like 55, 60. Reach out to those creators and sponsor them.
Right.
Your ROI is significant, and I feel like that's one thing that I do when I talk to sponsors. Is like, hey, my packages are probably way competitive because they're a little bit lower, but the ROI is crazy. I have an amazing, loyal, listening community that's going to really, and I'm kind of, I don't know how you are, Rob, but I don't take on sponsors from things that I don't believe in, because I know that they're going to listen. I know that the listeners are really going to take whatever I say to heart. But I feel like
I'll even add to this, like the layer of me learning from you in a sense is like, again,
Right.
and I say this totally respectfully, like I'm behind you. I'm coming up kind of in different ways. And this is another one of those ways. Like sponsorship wasn't even a thing that I thought about or considered in the traditional sense, because like we're too small. We're like just getting like da-da-da-da-da. Right. And the show for a handful of years had served a totally different purpose. Right. So I was like, okay, now I'm making it more like a broad public podcast. But I'll tell you, since like late last year, when I was like, okay, I want to make a go of this podcasting thing, like as a mechanism to make a living, I opened it up. And in our case, to your point about filtering we don't just like take anything to promote, is we're just starting. And so I did the natural thing and I went to our community. And I was like, hey, network of people who are, we call you guys, which you now become an alumnus of the show. We don't just call you a former guest, because literally we're implying the truth that is, you become connected to other people in our community, other people who've been on the show. They listen to each other. You all listen to each other's episodes. Then someone texts me or WhatsApps me and goes like, hey, can you introduce me to Ritzy? Because like I heard that episode, and like I think I should talk to her about what we're doing. And so I just started reaching out to people. I was like, hey, would you want to like out promote your firm or your agency or your
Yeah.
whatever on our show. And they were like, oh my God, that'd be awesome. Right. I mean, like great. So to your point, yes, it's really got to be about trusted. I would like to think I'll hold that standard as I get bigger. Right. But like you are, but like, it should be ideally, if we're going to maintain this communal kind of feel to it, it should be that. So,
Right.
so yeah, that's a pretty easy answer to like, how do we promote more diverse voices in podcasting is like, hey, businesses, support more diverse voices in podcasting.
Yeah, just support them financially, because it takes a lot of time and effort, as you know, to do this. Whether you do it solo or you have a team, it takes time and money. And to make it sustainable, then how can you help them? You can help them by retweeting, putting on your stories, sending links to your friends, telling, oh, I listened to this really great episode, da 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 da. And also the monetary factor of that. And, it could be someone in your community, but, do not hesitate to reach out to large companies. They're really
I'm just getting to that point now, right? Like, we're starting
reach out to large companies and let them know, like, hey, we might not have 1 million downloads, but we do have this strong community that rolls hard. That's going to really go with what we say.
And to your point,
yeah, that's very important.
And to your point, right? I think it's a theme now I picked up throughout today from you is like all these things is like smaller circle, higher value, right? Like smaller known groups of community people, constituencies, etc., greater return because it's a higher value. It's more emotionally, personally invested, right? And therefore more sticky, so to speak, right? And therefore greater returns. Like, no, 100% true. All right, we're going to shift gears, get away from podcasting a little bit, because there's like a whole other million things we could talk about. And I want you to educate me in this little next segment, because we're about to talk about two things that I am not going to lie, I know almost nothing about, right? So you are super involved in both Web3 and crypto. You're very active in these communities. You are involved in this organization, Ola Metaverso, which we referenced in your introduction. You're on the board of the Women of Web3. I think y'all wrote a book together. If I was paying attention last year, like you've spoken to the United Nations, and you weren't spoken to the United Nations about Word to Your Mama. Like you were speaking to the United Nations about the Women of Web3 and crypto technologies. Like, so I've got a whole bunch. I would love to, like, and the obvious, like, why did you wind up in these spaces? But I have one real curious thing, first and foremost. Like, do you see these industries as, frankly, more diverse and inclusive than like traditional technology or tech or big tech and or finance? And if you do, I'm curious, like, why?
Yes. So for sure, I entered the space in fall of 2021, and it was via what I mentioned before, your Herd show. Those guys that I talked to pretty much daily, like these world famous artists, one of them was like, I'm working with a company and we're going to be doing an NFT drop. And we were like, what is that? He's like, I don't know what that is, but we're doing it. So then I went down a rabbit hole. I was like, what is NFT? What is Web3, emerging tech? Then I heard, like maybe a couple weeks later, I heard this podcast that has the longest name, so I can never remember it. I'm not going to say it. It was episode 542 of Tim Ferriss, who I love, who's like a podcasting like OG. And it was him with Chris Dixon and Naval Ravikant. And they were talking about Web3, but they were taking us back to Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. What can it do? The potentials, where it's going. It's still the wild, wild west. And Tim Ferriss was talking about something. He was talking about DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, and how
I remember that was all everybody talked about for like 6 months, right?
Yeah, and he would be what he talked about, and I love the history, so I recommend that episode to everybody. But what Tim Ferriss was talking about was what aligned with me was how can we help others? He was talking about doing it for research, right? Where maybe we don't have big pools of money for these major research, pools, but we could do something smaller. And I was just like, oh, so who are the Chris Dixon and Naval Ravikants in my community, in our communities? So that was my entry point to this. And then I entered, and then that just started how I don't know what it is, Rob. It's just, my son pointed it out maybe a year ago. He's like, how is it that every industry you get into, immediately you get into it, and then you're like with the top people? And I was like, I don't know. It's because I love data, Rob, and I want to know how everything works. I need to know, because I feel like that makes me better at what I do, collecting the data, and then I can distill that information and disperse it to the communities that need it, that historically don't have access to it. So as I got into it, and now we're here a couple of years later, why I speak at the United Nations is to have more diversity and inclusion in emerging tech. But what I found in my years is it is more inclusive, but we don't know it is. Because if you go to any regular person on the street and you mention crypto, they're immediately going to think about crypto bros. They're going to think about scams. They're going to think about what limited media, mass media has picked up and what has been distributed to the masses. But being in the circles that I have been, I was just in December, well, it's going to be a year almost. In December, I was at I was in Washington, D.C. for a congressional briefing of women on blockchain.
Yeah.
And it's the numbers and the data is there that Black, Latina, Indigenous, Asian, the marginalized communities, they're utilizing emerging tech. And when I say emerging tech, I'm talking about what is emerging tech now that changes industries and governments. And that's currently is AI, blockchain, which includes like crypto and everything under the Web3 umbrella, spatial web, which is like VR, AR, all that stuff, like the metaverses and stuff like that. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about emerging tech. But I've been on panels and had conversations with folks for the other podcasts that I do, and been at events on the policy level with companies that have done immense research showing that it is those communities are actually utilizing it. And one of the main reasons why is there's less barrier to entry if you think about it. And also systemically, when you think about the stock market and you think about, Silicon Valley and stuff like that, you think like, oh, that's not for me as a brown person, as a woman. You're thinking, that's not made for me. That wasn't for me, And if you think historically, when the internet was, the birth date of the internet was January 1st, 1983, that wasn't built for us. It wasn't built by us. But now there's builders and creatives that are utilizing this because you only need really an internet connection. And the access isn't there yet. That's one of the things that I'm actually, BTS working on right now is better ways and safer ways for us to learn and be in this, ecosystem to help people get inspired to be creators and builders. And I think that we also have that community mentality.
Yeah.
We grew up with it. It's in for the most part, I'm not speaking for everyone, for the most part, Black, brown, Indigenous communities, we have community in the house, we have community with our friends, and we're all about community and sharing resources. Like, oh, I just found out such and such. Mm-hmm. You can come up on da-da-da, right? Like if you're from the streets, and you take that into business. And what happened to me was I entered a space, a whole ecosystem, and I had to learn the language. There was terms that I didn't know, and I had to navigate. And there were so many different landmines. But then I got with other people that were maybe a couple of steps ahead of me. Maybe they were exactly where I was at, and maybe a couple of steps below me. But we're like, let's get together and let's build these bridges to learn. So that's been a beautiful thing. Another thing that I noted is, I worked in the music industry, entertainment industry, in the art industry. I've been doing so much more IRL, in real life, connecting in this super tech-centric industry.
Digital world, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to all the conferences, in the United States and globally, and we're all about connecting and in these relationship building. And it's just like, oh, I have this new thing that's on the blockchain. I want to get it to as many people as possible. Oh, you have a community? Then
it's fascinating.
Can I go speak to your community via, Twitter? I know it's X, but I will always call it Twitter. On a X space or, on your Discord, on your Telegram. And it's just been this community thing where it's just like, oh, I had a cousin who found out how to trade crypto, buy crypto. I had a friend in the neighborhood who realized that they could create an NFT and do this. And, I've talked to so many people in so many different communities, in the indigenous community, in the Black community, of like, how you learned this, can you teach it over here? Or what can we, do a barter or a knowledge exchange? And also above and beyond that, it's just like, who are the bad players? It's hard to navigate. It's literally still the wild, wild west. Years in, it's still the wild, wild west. And also time, you learn so much in such a short amount of time because things evolve so quickly. So we always say like, oh, it's been a month. It's kind of like dog years. Oh, you've been a month in this space. That's really like 6 months to a year. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So yeah, like everything that I do in all the industries, the through line is, how can I be an advocate for our community so that they have more access and more resource and more education? And that doesn't waver because I go from the entertainment industry to here. I just take that knowledge and I bring it over here and I apply it here. And so it's lovely to see just how much we connect women. Being part of Women in Web3 has been tremendous. We came up in the industry together and just like, we need more women. The numbers are abysmal in tech for women, and they're even less when it comes to emerging tech and Web3.
Okay.
So it's like, how do we change that? And it's education, access, and just, sharing that. So
I love that.
I've seen it just be way more inclusive, but not mass media is not covering that it is way more inclusive. It's like you got to be in it to understand that.
I was going to say, and I don't even know, how much to what degree, maybe far less degree than it was at the time of kind of the peak, like 2021, early 2022, as you said, right? Like, I don't know that it's covered much at all, right? It seems to me from the outside, and again, I was one of those who, like, I wasn't involved in it. I'm always like either late to or skip the trends altogether. And so like, but I always know so many people that I'm like, okay, you're into that. Like, let me watch how you move. Let me see what you do. And it seems like, in part, this is my kind of one comment about everything related to now what you've described as like Web3. I think that all the underlying technologies, like all the different pieces, are like great. And again, old guy dating myself here, like essentially like really productive, useful middleware, right? Like they're all pieces of the software puzzle that can be utilized to enable all kinds of different cool use cases in all kinds of different applications across industry and sectors and whatnot. But all that was being sold in the beginning was like hype, get rich quick, right? And what's interesting to me is what is interesting, but maybe not surprising as I listen to you describe it and your experiences in the community, is like all the hypesters, which sadly mostly were just white young dudes, right? Like all the hypesters and then all the venture capitalists and all the money people who, when they figured out there wasn't just easy gold mine money to be made, they all bailed out of it, right? Yeah. And yes, yet the underlying technologies are still just as valuable potentially as they were, right? But then the people that came into it without that, like, get rich quick, but like more like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I think this is an easier barrier to entry community organization technology. I can get access to this easier than I can trying to get access to this enterprise world over here, this over here. And then you all kind of got in there and then found each other and then just had persisted. And so now the Web3 community, and I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of other people in my community, in my brain, in my relationships. And I'm like, oh yeah, like all the people that are like still in 2025, like deeply passionately involved in advocacy around Web3, crypto, et cetera, blockchain, like they're all brown skinned people. I know like two white dudes that are still, and frankly, one of them is a great supporter of our show and a sponsor and an alumnus of our show. And I'm like, yeah, but I did a voiceover read ad for his thing. And I'm like, but even the way we did that it's better than the way that you were, than the way that he was presenting his story back in like 2022. Right. So that's fascinating.
That's totally true. It's, when I got in, it was a bull run. There were so many players, people were making so much money. And then it's just like, oh, we're about to see who's really in it for the right reasons. And let's connect and let's align with those people. And that's one of the things that I do as a consultant. It's either I help companies figure out not just what trends they want to attach themselves to, but what's really going to help their company grow by utilizing emerging tech. Maybe it's too early for your company. Maybe what's available is not there quite yet. Also, it's just like providing workshops for different organizations, different companies, schools. It's just like, oh, this is what it is. I break it down. And these are real world use cases of projects, collections that I know these people personally, that I've bought maybe into that community personally. And it's just like, this is what's happening that's not being covered by mass media. And how can that inspire you? Right. Yeah. And those that are utilizing the Black and brown folks globally, the marginalized communities globally, they're utilizing it because it's providing solutions to global problems that can shift not just and change their entire family, but their community, their city, their country, their governments. Yeah. Right. There's one of the first times I went into a Twitter space and I was like, oh, I'm in the right space. I'm with the right people. I heard someone talk about they live in Juarez and they're using this was 2021. They're utilizing the sales of NFTs to help fight against femicide.
I mean, boom, right there, right? Like real use case.
Do you know what I mean?
That's, hugely important. Yeah.
That's important. And then, last year I went to Consensus. It was in Austin, Texas. And I go to every panel that's social impact. I go to every panel and I try to connect to those people. People don't know. A lot of people in the space didn't know that UNICEF has a crypto fund where they invest in companies. They don't get equity in companies that help them with their mission. They're the biggest distributors of children vaccines globally. So they invest in, I met the founders of companies that were from India and they're like, oh, we use blockchain to do the supply chain. So we know, oh, these vaccines have expired. These vaccines went to exactly like that. What excites me about emerging tech.
Yeah, that's what excites me. Like it's funny. I'm closing my eyes. I'm picturing like these two particular young dudes. And we're hiking like Runyon Canyon, and this is like early 2022, and they're I'm giving them the old like, okay, tell me exactly what you do, but like tell me like I'm in a kindergarten, right? And then and they're so and I listen to it all, and I stop them, and I turn around, and I'm like, so it's middleware, it's like the plumbing of the internet. It's gonna help do this. It's gonna help track vaccines and expiration dates and da. And they're like, yeah, I guess, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. And like, skip all the hype nonsense. Like, skip all the like, change the world. We won't need government anymore. We won't need banks anymore. I'm like, whoa, bro, like easy. Like even if you want to get to that, that's still going to take us like 175 years. Like, so, and I'm like, come back to earth and tell me like, who could you sell something to that they would pay you to help do something that is meaningful in the world that exists, right? And it was always these like fundamental. And I was like, okay, see, I get excited about that because I'm old enough that I sold middleware way back in the day. Like I sold software that wasn't the sexy front end and wasn't the database back end, but was the stuff that glued it together.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think middleware, sure. But I also think when people find out exactly how it works and why it's so important, it's transparency, it's ownership, and that changes the game where, Web 2, we couldn't do that. And this is, there's indigenous, I've worked and talked to indigenous folks in Canada that utilize blockchain to show ownership. And this is a community that, everything has been stolen. Everything has been tried to have been erased. And they're trying to archive their language that so many have lost. And they're utilizing that, putting on the blockchain, which means it's transparent, it's immutable, and it says, this is theirs.
Yep. That's beautiful.
No one can take that away.
That's awesome.
It's a ledger that says this is theirs. And I feel that's very important, especially to the marginalized communities globally.
No, 100% true.
We are so grateful to be supported by sponsors like our friends at Shore Capital. In today's venture capital world, it's not just about cash. It's about relationships. Capital is harder to find, limited investors have fewer managers that they can trust, and the industry is just filled with far too much hype.
Shore Capital is an early stage venture fund investing in the world's most ruthlessly iterative founders, helping its limited partners to find founders who are solving the world's most dynamic problems, teams that excel in mastering the idea maze, teams moving with a rapid iterative velocity and demonstrating radical resourcefulness. Shore Capital doesn't just write checks though. They become fractional co-founders when needed, offering strategic support, high leverage relationship development, and a deep commitment to the long-term success of their portfolio companies. If you are a ruthlessly iterative founder with a bold vision or a limited investor seeking sustained access to the brightest big thinkers of our time, Shore Capital wants to meet you. So visit shorecapital.notion.site to learn more. You slipped in and mentioned AI as emerging tech. I was going to ask you, like, do we think AI is emerging tech, or is AI already kind of big tech and mostly being built and run by, tech bro dudes wearing puffy jackets and khaki pants?
It's still emerging tech.
Okay,
it's still emerging tech. And because it's moving so fast, it's evolving so fast, so many more people have access to it and are building their own. When you think of AI, you're thinking about like OpenAI and all the players that built these large language models here in the United States. And it's those builders and that input. But as I am a, advocate for, diversity in emerging tech, and especially with what I'm building and trying to mesh AI with blockchain is, well, what else is out there? What are other people doing? And there's one called Sea Lion, Southeast Asia, and they're creating their own, basically, in layman's terms, they're basically building their own AI. And they're feeding it and giving it the information. And they're like, hey, we have all these different countries with all these different dialects, and we have all these different cultural intricacies, right? Let's build our own.
Okay.
And then recently, I don't know if you heard, there's Latin GPT, and it's all different.
Did not hear that.
Yeah, different Latin America countries getting together, feeding it indigenous languages, the same thing. It's just like, oh, okay, we don't want to be dependent on this United States-based large language model that doesn't understand us, that doesn't even care possibly to understand us and how we communicate and how we navigate the world, and possibly for some regions how we're connected to the earth and Mother Nature. And so it's just like, oh, I see a lot of this. And today I just saw, because I follow a bunch of newsletters, that Mistral just came out and they're trying to have their own sovereignty, to have their own AI in the EU.
Okay.
So everyone's trying to have their own regional thing, and it's still emerging tech because it's changing industries and it's happening so fast and it's hard to keep up. So if someone says they're an expert, they're really not an expert. They just know a lot, maybe about one part of it. And it's important, and it's even more important. It's integral that we have folks that look like us building it, inputting it, creating businesses, utilizing it, educating folks that are in the committees that are supposed to keep it safe, and one way that I feel, and I'm doing research currently on it, is that AI plus blockchain, because it's a ledger. And so it's like, what does that look like, and what could be the future in that? And I'm sure anyone that might be listening to this possibly a month, 2 months from now, so much stuff could have happened already. And that's why I feel like it's still emerging tech. It's changing the game in so many different levels.
This is why I asked the questions. I'm super glad I asked that question, because I did not have that sense of it. Again, not like, admittedly, like late to and or skip some trends. And so I'm at that level of like AI consumption where it seems like it's just Sam Altman and everything, whatever he wants to do. Right. And I was aware, I guess, loosely that was being worked on in different ways in different places, but not to the level of depth that you just shared. That's incredible. That's actually, now I'm really encouraged, right? Because that now I'd rather have AI be emerging tech, because then, to your point, it'll still be treated in its infancy from a policy standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from a contribution standpoint, from a diversity of opinions, perspectives, languages, models, cultures. Like the more early it is still considered to me, the more emerging it is, the more likelihood that we actually could get this one right, as opposed to maybe kind of how we didn't get the internet right because we just were like, oh, this is amazing. And then they told us for like 5 or 6 years it was just going to connect us all and it was going to be beautiful. It was going to be harmonious because we were going to be, and then we just kind of said, we trust you guys. And then, like 8 companies made the internet and we wound up with the shitstorm that we have now, right? Which is like, okay, maybe we should have paid some more attention to it. All right, that was awesome. Thank you for that. We're gonna dip last kind of section, just another different vibe here because again, I'm trying to give the totality of you a voice today. So this is a little bit more personal. You can talk about whatever you like or don't like. I have no problem with that. I don't think any of these questions are going to be too invasive, but first one's first. And this is really timely today. Like this episode won't come out for a few weeks, but we're recording it on a day when the Supreme Court just came down and gave just a shitty temporary stay, which I mean, essentially they might as well have just made it a permanent order, but they didn't. It will still be debated. It will still be appealed, blah, blah, blah. But they basically intervened and said that our federal government can continue to just snatch up brown and black people or people who don't speak English the way that they would like them to speak English, who might have an accent, or who stand in the wrong part of the neighborhood or the parking lot in the mornings. You live in this intersection every day, today, yesterday, 20 years ago. Like you live at this intersection between art, activism, and algorithms, I like to say. How do you just keep your soul, like yourself? How do you keep your soul charged and alive in the United States right now when we're being just steamrolled and gaslit into this version of our country, which neither you and I signed up for?
Yeah. Well, Rob, it is a practice. It's a constant practice. I think even before 2025 started, in the communities that I belong to, it's been a constant practice. I feel for those of us in the Black and brown communities and in the marginalized, especially the Black and brown communities, it doesn't matter what administration has been in office. We've always been fighting behind the scenes. Like I'm a broken record, but it's true. Mass media doesn't cover it. What has been happening to our people? What has happened with immigration? People that look like me. I've experienced it when I was younger, and that the fact that it's happening the way it's happening now is crazy. The way I keep saying is throughout the years, but especially since the pandemic, is therapy, meditation, being out in nature, and being in community.
There you go.
You have to stay informed, but also you have to have a balance of how long you're on the internet, social media. Twitter I don't know if you're still on there. I'm still on there because of the industry that I'm in.
Yeah.
It has become something crazier than it was, if that was even possible.
Yeah, I had to get off in 2023. I couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, no, this is going to kill me early.
Yeah. And my feed, luckily, I follow people in tech, but prior to that, academics and activists. So my feed is pretty good if I stay with who I'm following with. So I think it's just a balance. And I don't know how it would be if my son was grown and living out in the world already. I feel like that has been a great anchor for me. Plus, I homeschool him, so it's also a different interaction. He keeps me going. He keeps me sane. And to keep it 1000% real, because I'm an older mom, he's, a teen now. He's about to turn 13. He's hormonal, and I'm going through perimenopause, Rob. So it's 2 hormonal people just trying to live.
Right, there you go. 100%. And I was having like flashbacks, mental, emotional flashbacks to me being a single full-time dad to Riley when she was going through high school, and thinking to myself, like, I have no idea what was going on in the world between like 2007 and 2011. Like I was so heads down. I was like, oh, there's an election. Yeah, right. I should go vote. Like, okay, cool. But otherwise, like I was so immersed in the tiny, tiny little bubble of a
Right.
teenage girl's high school life in Southern California, and me basically just trying to keep her alive and with options and out of jail and
Right.
making good choices. So yeah, no, I feel you. Like I can imagine. And you brought up your son. I don't want to talk a whole bunch about your personal life deeply, but like in this context, exactly this context, kind of one of the last questions I had before we get to our last question is like, I mean, being a mom of a teenage son, a brown skinned boy in this world, how do you think about that? He's an anchor to you to keep you sane, right? And also focused. But like, how are you preparing him to navigate this world that exists, not some fantasy version of it that we hope could exist
Right.
someday?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what is your advocacy, what does your activism look like, and how does it evolve? And my people in my circles, we talk about that all the time. Pre having a son, my activism looked differently. I was out in the streets, I was protesting, I was doing all that stuff. When you're a mom, some people take their kids. For me, that wasn't my route. My route was like, what could I do here? And my activism is raising a young man who is really the world because he's Mexican, Black, and Korean. You know, he looks different. And raising him to be a global citizen that contributes to the world. And one of the ways, and I know we're very fortunate, is that we are able to homeschool. So at this point in homeschooling, I no longer teach him the subjects, I curate. And so I'm able to, world history last year was the reading over a period of the year, Howard Zinn's America history book.
Wow.
Discussing it, reading it, and discussing it to really learn the real history of this country. Him being Mexican and Black and Korean, we can't skip over certain things, right? Because people,
Literally,
his
yeah.
parents look like what's happening.
Right.
And so that's one way. And then also, he learns by watching. Our children learn by not by what we say, but what we do. So what are different ways when certain elections were happening? I have this group of women that we're called postcard bees. I can't say the word. And we write postcards. We do all those postcards to voters. And he would help me put the stamps on them when he was little. And we would take him he would see me do that.
Yeah.
And then recently, earlier this year, a couple of months ago, I'm also an artist, international artist, and I was asked by the Center for Human Rights and Constitutional Law to illustrate what was happening at the border detention prisons to kids. And I was like, that's my advocacy. It's like, what can I do with what I have now? And so he saw me late nights, all day, all night, try to get these illustrations, illustrating these horrific quotes from these kids and these families in these centers, and seeing the weight of it. We talk about it, and it's just like, oh, I did by actions. He saw how I contributed. We had conversations, and these kids, they know a lot. They understand a lot. And it's just like, how can you tailor it so that they, can understand at their level? And my about to be 13-year-old, he has a soul of a 40-year-old. I mean, he's advanced, and another reason why we're homeschooling. But, it's just like, have these conversations and do show by action. And I feel like I get the biggest reward that I get is when he's out in public or he goes stay at a friend's house and they just say, he's a great human being. He's very polite, but he's, vocal, and he have agency, have education, be kind, and always look out for people. And I'm still old school about, being, having certain names for elders and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that stuff is important. We eat dinner every day together, at least dinner.
We did that too.
And yeah. And it's just like, what can we do to stay sane in a crazy world, in a crazy atmosphere?
I love that. Your love for your son and your love for being a mom literally like jumps through the screen and jumps through the microphone, which I love. And I'm also like, I'm glad, I'm like listening going, oh, that's cool. See, it's working for her. That's what I did too. That's awesome. That was one of those things I used to tell her, I said, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm like a single dad, like in his late 30s, early 40s. And I'm like, you're like 12, 13, 14 years old. I was like, we're going to figure this out together. But I said, but like one of the baseline rules, I'm basically just going to try and replicate what my both parents together like did to me growing up in the 70s. I was like, we're just going to see how much of that works. I was like, but one of them is going to be like, we're going to have dinner together. And I was like, and if you want to invite your girlfriends over, like, are they here studying or after school and they want to stay? Like, and that,
Right.
that became the thing. And God bless, like by the end of like, sophomore, junior year, literally the nightly exercise was like, okay, it's dinner time. Who's staying? Who's going? And literally I'd be making dinner for like 7 girls. Right.
Oh,
Because
I love it.
they would all,
You were that house.
I was that house because my mom made our house that house. So I was like, I'm going to do that.
Love that.
Right. And then the girls were like, because literally at dinner, we would have conversation, right? Like we would talk about politics and relationships and boys and all the stuff. And so they, like that was the greatest gift was by the end of high school to have some of those young women who then I was like extra Rob or extra dad or super Rob or whatever, like, second
That's
dad.
beautiful.
Right. But to have it be that like we left this legacy of thoughtful conversation about things that some of the girls would be like, yeah, like honestly, I just like having, you're not a very good cook, Rob, but like I like having dinner at your house because we talk about stuff that my parents never talk about. They never ask me about.
Right.
Right. And I was like,
a safe space. You provided them a safe space.
Literally, yeah. But I mean,
with an adult.
You're doing that with your son. And again, it was that juxtaposition of like male to females. And now in your case,
Yes.
like strong Latina woman to strong young man, right? He becomes a better man because in part he was raised by you being a strong woman. I like to think my daughter is who she has become as now a 31-year-old mother of herself, of her own for the first time. Like I'd like to think she in part became that because I was the dad that I was in her life when she needed that role model. So that's awesome and beautiful. Right. And if our kids aren't ultimately the ultimate emerging tech, I don't know who is. Right. So, all right. So last question, we'll get you out of here. You give me more than so much time today. I'm so grateful for this conversation. It's all of the mix of beautiful and intelligent and fascinating as I expected it to be. But so last question, a little bit more actionable for the young next Ritzy P that's out there somewhere. Right. So what would be 2 steps that you would suggest to this young, smart, socially conscious Latina who feels that she's got a really strong voice and she's got a lot to say, but she doesn't know how to pursue it, but she thinks podcasting is interesting or storytelling? Like this person has limited resources, but they're like maybe a lot like you when you were younger. Like, what are the first 2 things that you suggest that they do to kind of begin to light their path?
Whatever they're into, whatever you're into, say I'm talking to them, whatever you're into, dive deep. You have access. There's so many free resources. If you're into acting, if you're into podcasting, go online. Is YouTube University still a thing? I'm sure there's something equivalent. Go on there, learn as much as you can, educate yourself, and then try everything. Try it all. You know what I mean? That's how I have navigated this world. I lost my mom 30 years ago. I lost her at an early age. And it was a blessing because I saw at an early age that I should live the life and just go for everything, do everything scared. It's a thing that I learned from homeschooling, and they're saying, and my son is gifted, and that's kind of, you need extra support. It's like it's not typical. You're not neurotypical, right? And so one thing is that you want to be perfect and you don't want to do it until you have all the information. And it's just like, just do it scared, but also you're not good at it yet. You know what I mean? Yet is a powerful word to add to a lot of sentences and statements. And for my son, he hated piano lessons because he wanted to be great. Everything he does, he wants to be great immediately, right? He's just a perfectionist. I was like, you're not getting it yet. And now he's like, thank you so much for piano class, because now he can learn whatever he wants and he has the ear. He's gifted in that. But it was just like, he didn't want to do it. But what can you do? So to the young me is educate yourself, do it scared, and know that you can change your mind at any time. And usually you have to take that first initial step, first action step, so you know which next direction you're going to be in. Sometimes you need to take that wrong direction to redirect you to the right way.
And sometimes you get lost because you make what you think is the right decision and it turns out to be a wrong one. But you could just say, like, I'm just not where I need to be yet. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
just yet. Yeah.
Getting lost is just not being found yet. That's all. It's just, it's all
You're
how we
exactly where you're meant to be at this moment in time.
100% true. And exactly where we were meant to be today on this day was right here having this conversation. So I'm super grateful for this. Like, it's honestly like blown me away. You've made my week with this conversation. So I'm really, really grateful. How can people find you, connect to you, find you for the consultative work at your consulting agency website, connect with you on the different podcasts, whatever you want to promote right now? We'll put it in the show notes, but like, let's shout it out.
Thank you. On all social media, I'm Ritzy P, at Ritzy P. And I have a bunch of links to all the things that he mentioned. If you go to ritzyperiwinkle.com/links, and it gives you everything that you need. If you are a company, you want consultancy, if you want office hours, I also offer that because, barrier to entry. Someone can't maybe get me on a retainer, but maybe they just want an hour with me to ask me anything. And regarding podcasting, I really don't advertise it enough. But, I want all of us to have a podcast and I want all of us to be online. So, I have resources for that. I can consult you on how to get started from jump because it's not competition. I want everybody to win.
Yep. There's plenty of space for all of us. Somebody said
Yes.
to me, somebody said a couple of months ago, they were like, at the peak of blogging, there were something like 900 million blogs. And at the peak of podcasting right now, when you talk about like active podcasts that actually do more than like 3 or 5 episodes, it's like, 300,000 or 400,000 podcasts. Right. I'm like, there's still so much space, people. Like, let's relax. It's not oversaturated yet. Everybody has a space for a voice. This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rob. You're amazing. I'm sure your daughter would probably concur. So thank you so much. And I'm sure the impact, I think it's beautiful, of the young women that were in your safe space. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Gift of my life. They all made me a better man. So thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did recording it. As always, we thank you so much for listening and watching. Today's show was recorded here in Los Angeles and produced by the incomparable Deanna Bernal in Mexico City. We can only grow this show by you listening and sharing the show with friends. So please find, follow, subscribe, and share our audio-only show on Spotify, Apple, or via any other popular podcasting platforms, as well as find the video version of our show now available on our YouTube channel over at Entrepreneurial Thinkers. And of course, you can follow along on our various social media platforms for fun and informative clips and content at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, wherever you can find us. And if you'd like to connect with me, you can find me at I Am Rob Ryan on just about any social media platform. Gracias, thank you, and have an awesome day.